Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast. It's a beautiful day. I'm excited to talk about women-owned small business set-asides in fiscal year 2024 for the federal market. So as we move forward, I really want you to understand from a set-aside perspective, you can wait for things to happen or you can make things happen. There's this great line that some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and some people say, what happened, right? And we want to be the people who make things happen. Women-owned small business set-asides there's not a lot of them, but we can change that. And if we put the responsibility on our shoulders and not put it on the government shoulders, then we'll be able to get control. I teach small businesses to take responsibility, not blame, but take responsibility for why things are not happening the way you want. In this case, why aren't there more women-owned small business set-asides? If I put the responsibility on the government, then I'm just going to have to sit back and wait for these agencies to change what has never been changed. But if I put responsibility on my shoulders, on your shoulders, then we now are in control of the change. And I'll talk to you about what that control means. But I really want you to think about it, right? You can sit back and wait and be reactive, or you can be proactive and drive the change you want to see. And I want you to think about how would that change impact your business? If you saw 100% more set-asides in 2024 than there were in 2023 or 2022, how do you think that would impact your business? How do you think that would impact overall the Women-Owned Small Business Program, right? I think it would be a huge impact, a positive impact to women-owned small businesses, and it's why I do trainings like this one. So today I'm going to drive down into the reality. I really like people to face the facts first. And so the reality of the Women-Owned Small Business Program and the set-asides that happen in there. The second thing I want to talk about is just making sure we're understanding why is it important to have set-asides? Why not just go after opportunities full and open or something, right? And then as we move forward into bullet 3, 4, and 5 of what I'm going to talk about today, it gets into the how, right? So who makes the women-owned small business set-aside determinations? Who's the one who does that set-aside decision? Fourth thing I want to talk about is when do these decisions to set an opportunity aside to women-owned small business or any other set-aside, when does that happen? When you know that, you begin to understand when you can impact it. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is just some tips on how to drive women-owned small business set-asides across the government, but also in the agency that you're trying to target here. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. For some reason, I was hesitating. I was going to say government contracting is not a secret. It's just a set-aside. Like, I got set-asides in my mind. But it's not a secret. It's a process, and processes go from A to Z. When you follow a process, you're going to have repeatable, predictable results. When you follow a process driving towards women-owned small business set-asides, you're going to have more set-asides, right? We can guarantee that if we do enough of the right activity over and over again, we're going to sit there and see the results that we want. And then also in the chat, that's your community. Engage with the folks that are in there. I'm giving you an opportunity to come together and meet some other people. At different points, I'm going to ask somebody a question. For example, are you a woman-owned small business right now? Put that into the chat. Just let us know. Because if people are looking at the chat, right now we have about close to 80 people live, right? But as you put that in, people will look and go, oh, you're in technology, you're in cyber, and you're a woman-owned small business. Also, don't hesitate if you're one of those SDVOs or hub zones or 8A firms. You go ahead and put your designation in there as well. Today's training is focused on women-owned small business set-asides, but the reality is the process I'm going to teach covers down on any one of the small business programs. It's just a process. Speaking of meeting people, do me a favor, make sure you're tracking on the No Nonsense Networking event we're doing on October 17th. It's an awesome event. I'm super excited because I really want to meet you. I really want to meet people like Devin Bangert, who's here. If you haven't seen, scroll up in the chat. This is the guy who shows up early, opens up the doors to our networking event, who stands at the doorway and says, good morning. So Devin, I really appreciate you. I'm looking forward to meeting you virtually, right? And so I'd love to meet a whole bunch of other people who are in the GovCon space, and I know that you want to make connections as well. So make sure you sign up for this networking event. It's the first one we're doing, and we're super excited about it. Okay, let's dive into the meat of today's training by beginning with the reality of the Women-Owned Small Business Set-Aside Program, or set-asides that are happening. So this chart, I'll read it, right, in case you're listening to this. But this chart is showing you the difference between the amount of set-asides that happen for women-owned small businesses and the other three programs, small business programs, right? And it's just crazy to me, the stats that are here. So women-owned small business and economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses, I put them together. I don't separate them, so I list them here, but they're the same from a woman-owned small business perspective. And they had 2,624 set-aside opportunities, right? So if you go in, and this data is coming from FPDS and USA Spending as of October 2023. So it's very recent data. This data is also, though, FY 2022, because 2023 data is still rolling in, but this is really representative of any given year. But 2,600 opportunities were set aside for women-owned small businesses. 2,600 were also set aside for hub zones. We're going to come back to that in a second. But then there's this massive jump that I can't even do how many percentages it is, but like 900% higher for 8A small businesses. 8As had 18,000 set-asides. Women's small businesses had 2,000. 8As had 18,000. And service-disabled veteran-owned had 21,000. Women-owned small businesses are not getting their fair share of the government dollars and the government set-aside. The reason I put facts like this down is because the SBA in particular is the worst violator of this. They share data in a way that makes them look good, right? And I'm not talking about individual people. Yes, there's heroic people in the SBA and agencies, but I'm talking about as a group. The federal government keeps telling us they're doing women-owned small businesses right by, hey, look how much money went to women-owned small businesses. And what I argue is that it went to women-owned small businesses despite what the agencies and the government did, not because of what they did. And now, going into 2024, I want women-owned small businesses to drive it more. So these other columns, I really wanted to point out just for you to understand this. This data on the two right-hand columns, SBA certified, self-certified women-owned small businesses, and the other programs. This is data coming out of DSBS, right? The Dynamic Small Business Search, or SAM. And so the SBA certified says there's 11,000 certified women-owned small businesses. That's a huge amount, right? But there's 166,000 self-certified women-owned small businesses. That's more than half of the amount of small businesses that are in SAM right now, right? And so this is crazy. When there's that many qualified women-owned small businesses, there should be far more set-asides. Again, I'm not going to wait for the government to do something. I'm going to teach you how we go make it happen. And I don't mean it in a bad way, but I mean it in a way that convinces the contracting officer to go, hey, that sounds good. Let's set aside a woman-owned small business. There's things we can do to drive it. But when you look at this data, the disparity is just wrong, especially when you think about the Hub Zone program, right? There's 2,600 set-asides for Hub Zone and for women-owned small businesses. But there's only 5,000 Hub Zone firms, and there's 166,000 women-owned small businesses. Tell me how that makes any sense. And it doesn't, right? But I want you to understand the facts. Don't listen to anybody out there saying that the women-owned small businesses are being treated right by the government, or people celebrating the numbers. The numbers are high because of women-owned small businesses, not because of the women-owned small business set-aside program. Okay, so let's look at it from a numbers perspective, right? So in this particular case, FY 2022, there was $680 billion contracted out there. Basically, this is what we call small business eligible dollars, or contract dollars that are out there. Of that, 158 billion went to small businesses. Again, this is FPDS and USA Spending data. But of that, 24 billion went to women-owned small businesses. 3.5% of the spend went to women-owned small businesses. That sounds really good. 24 billion, it sounds really good. But again, don't believe the hype, because when you believe the hype, then you think the government is doing something on your behalf, and they're not, right? Here's the reality. Of that 23 billion that went to women-owned small businesses, 96% of it was not set aside to women-owned small businesses, but the government took it as if they had set it aside. And so they put news out, and they used the news media and a lot of these government newspaper type online news folks to sit there and say, hey, look how well we treated women-owned small business. I'm like, but you didn't, did you? If you look right here, the most important number to be tracking is there was only 4% of the total dollars going to women-owned small businesses. So women-owned small businesses only got about 3.5% of the federal dollars in 2022. And only 4% of that was actually set aside. It's just crazy, right? And when you think about it, let me back up 2 slides. That's where you see the discrepancy between 2,600 set-asides and 18,000 set-asides, right? There should be an equal amount of set-asides. I don't know why there wouldn't be. There's no reason for there not to be a similar amount. And I'm not looking for anybody to take set-asides away from SDVOs or 8As. Take it away from the larges, right? Or more importantly, just set more of the small business dollars aside to women-owned small businesses. So hopefully these numbers make sense. I really want you to think about the numbers as you move forward because they help you understand the situation. So let's talk about why women-owned small business set-asides or why set-asides are important. I really just like to make sure everybody understands this. We have people who are new in this business and people who have been around a while. But from the top, right, access to federal dollars. The reason there's a Small Business Act is because small businesses in America, which make up 99% of the businesses out there, we are the backbone of America, right? The backbone of every single community. Small businesses weren't getting much of the federal dollars at all. So they created the Small Business Act that allowed the government to, or forced the government to spend and aim for 23%. Now it's a little higher, but 23% of the federal dollars, contract dollars, on small businesses or through small businesses. And then they had to set up rules with the largest who were winning and say, look, you got to do it as well, right? So they're constantly forcing it. Well, women-owned small businesses weren't getting their fair share, right? And that's what I mean by fair playing ground here. They weren't getting access to some of this. So it came down to small businesses, but then were women small businesses really getting a chance at those contracts? No. And so then they set this goal of 5% for women-owned small business dollars and said, okay, let's go there. So the idea of a woman-owned small business set aside is to create this fair playing ground where you have access to contract dollars, and they're not all up here where you have to compete with a much bigger pool. It's coming down to like businesses. The last bullet I had here on just why are they so important, and really this is the most important reason for me, is that it reduces the competition. There's 400,000 businesses in SAM. It changes at different points, right? But there's, let's say 300,000 for the moment, 300,000 small businesses in SAM who say they sell to the government. There's 11,600 certified, and that's a really important distinction, right? 11,600 certified women-owned small businesses. So if you can get an opportunity set aside to women-owned small businesses, you eliminate, like 290,000, 285,000 businesses, 285,000 potential competitors away, and now you just have the 11,600 women-owned small businesses. It's one of the best reasons to do set-asides. You're trying to eliminate your competition. That's fine. So for us, the reason we want to do set-asides is it reduces competition. Okay, so let's talk about who makes the determination on set-asides. By the way, I'm really curious if you're a woman-owned small business out there, have you participated in a woman-owned small business set-aside? Have you seen those in the agency, or do you not see many of those? Put that in the chat if you're willing to. I'd like to just track on who's able to see those set-asides. So when you think about a small business set-aside or a woman-owned small business set-aside, somebody has to make that determination. Somebody made that determination for the service disabled veterans to get 21,000, for the 8As to get 18,000 set-asides in 2022, right? So who makes that determination? And it really obviously is one person. It's what we call the focus of power in the government, the contracting officer. And so the contracting officer makes the final determination. But there are a lot of people who could influence the decision. You can influence the decision, by the way, by your responses, et cetera. We'll talk about that. But the contract specialist, if you're not familiar with this, generally, if you go into SAM, you'll see 2 points of contact on an opportunity at the bottom of a SAM entry. And one of them might be the contracting officer, and the other usually is the contract specialist. The contract specialist is basically the same, and I say this softly, basically the same as the contracting officer. They just don't have the ability to sign anything, but they're that knowledgeable. They're an acquisition personnel, and they work closely with the contracting officer. So some opportunities have many contract specialists, and some of them are also contracting officers at different levels, but they have the ability to influence that contracting officer. They're friends, they're colleagues, they work together. So what the contracting specialist is learning and the ideas they have, they bring it back to the KO and say, or the CO and say, hey, this is what I'm recommending, right? That's influence. Small business professionals within your target agency. These are really important people to understand and get to know and build a relationship. If you're in CDC down there, you want to get to know the small business specialists down in CDC so that you can make sure they're helping influence the contracting officer to think about women-owned small business set-asides. I might talk about this a little later, but anytime I send anything into an agency, an RFI response, an RFP response, whatever it is, I always copy the small business specialist. I know who they are and I put them on. I want to let the KO and the acquisition staff know that, hey, I'm making sure this small business professional is tracking on it. All right, sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not, but it's really important to engage them early and often. And the last one is a procurement center representative. If you don't know who this person is, go watch some of my training. I talk about them. I've interviewed a bunch of them, so you can watch them talking about their role. But the procurement center representatives, they work for SBA, but they have oversight over agencies. And basically, right, me summarizing it, their job is to make sure that any opportunity that could go small stays small. It doesn't go full and open, right? And they're a great one to get to know, because if you can make sure opportunities are being pushed down to small, then you can kind of continue that path down to woman-owned small business. I have an opportunity. I'm working with a customer right now. It's $50 to $100 million opportunity, and it's woman-owned small business set-aside, right? So what I'm telling my customers is, let's get in there and make sure that it stays that way, right? That the contracting officer has enough industry engagement that it's going to stay that way. But these things can happen. And the way I heard about that particular opportunity, ironically, was through a PCR. So these people are important for you to be talking to. Let's talk about when set-asides are determined. If you haven't seen something like this before, this is an acquisition roadmap. This particular one comes from USDA. I've done my own version of it from a generic standpoint for the government. But this one I love because it talks about a lot of different steps that the government acquisition and agency goes through, the different personnel, when things are getting done, who's doing stuff. Like right here, IGC is this independent government cost estimate. When you understand how the government operates, what their process is, you begin to understand how can you get in there, when can you get in there, when can you influence. And I circled in these two red circles are where set-asides are influenced the most, right? Market research is when the government goes out with a sources sought notice, an RFI notice, whatever, and they're reaching out to industry to see who's out there, who can help them think about the requirements, or who's out there who would be interested in responding to it. So you want to engage in market research. In order to do this, this means you need to be hearing about opportunities early enough. I talk about this in the 7-step process. That's the reason you have relationships in agencies, is so that you can hear about opportunities and then get engaged when they're doing market research and vendor engagement. And then as you see going forward, they have an acquisition strategy. I just saw my PowerPoint freezing, so hopefully it doesn't shut off. I'll have to watch that. But the acquisition strategy, it's getting determined. The reason I wanted to point this other circle out is that, or step in the process, is that once you respond to market research, don't stop. If you want that opportunity, keep engaging. I did a training recently in the past couple of weeks where I talk about how often is too often to follow up. It's never too often. You can keep following up. You're not a pest. You just don't want to be unprofessional. You don't want to be nagging them in a negative way or something, which I guess is another way of saying unprofessional. But following up and just making sure they know you're interested. And sometimes your follow-up is to go to the small business professional and say, hey, can you let them know I responded to the RFI? I don't want to be a pest, but I'm very, very interested in the opportunity. Never stop. Don't let them think about something else. Sometimes during the market research stage and the acquisition strategy formation, somebody else is in there influencing them, and all of a sudden you'll see it go somewhere else. So pay attention to when set-asides are determined. It is not when the RFP drops. It is not when you see it in SAM and they say, hey, I want you to respond to this requirement we have. It's in the market research really is when it is. So let's talk about how you can set aside or get more women-owned small business set-asides, right? You really can drive this. I did this 5 years ago when I started the chamber. We called it the Hub Zone Chamber of Commerce back then, because when I got started, the Hub Zone program was just in bad shape. They weren't getting set-asides. The set-asides they got were horrible. And more importantly to me, the amount of money that should have been going to Hub Zones, $13 billion at the time, was like half of that was going. And so we had this motto about get the $6 billion off the table. And it meant, let's get this off and into Hub Zone companies. And what I taught Hub Zone firms, same as I'm going to teach you now, is that it's our responsibility, because if we wait for the government, we're going to be waiting another 20 years and still have the same problem. But if we take charge, we can do something. And in that first year, small Hub Zone firms responded the way I'm going to advise you here, and they were able to push a 24% increase in set-asides to the HubZone program. That's massive, right? It represented 3 billion more going to from 7 billion to 3 billion more to HubZone firms. And women-owned small businesses can do the same thing this year. We don't have to 2024, right? We don't have to wait several years out. Oh, change takes time. No, it does not. Change is now in October, FY2024, right? We begin the process. So one of the first recommendations I have for you is to reach out and create this team of competimates, right? And so I called it a response team here, but this team of competimates, basically you're looking for 20 firms that are women-owned small businesses that are in your space. And you just get together and you talk. This is what larges do. They talk and they say, how can we influence the government to go in the directions we want? We small businesses have got to learn that particular lesson. Work together. Don't compete against each other. But you come together and you're competimates because your teammates are your partners in the responding, meaning you each are going to respond separately, but you're agreeing to go after opportunities that are, let's say, data analytics. So you go find 20 data analytic companies. And we just say, anybody sees one that we want to push to women-owned small business and we hear about it early enough, let us all know and we all agree to respond, right? So we're not coordinating our responses other than to just say we are going to respond. And then when we can push it to women-owned small business, set aside, we become competitors. Some of us might team up, you know what, you can prime and I'll just sub or something. But generally, we would compete. But now you've got like 20 competitors instead of thousands and thousands of competitors, right? But it begins with bringing together that team of women-owned small businesses that can respond rapidly and push for an opportunity to go to set aside, women-owned small business set aside. I just want to clarify this thing that I say, that there is no such thing as rule of two. I hear people talk about this all the time. And the problem with flat statements is we believe it is a certain way. And so a lot of us think if two people respond, you got to set aside the women-owned small business or whatever. You don't, right? The government, first off, doesn't have to do anything. The contracting officer has to make a determination for the best interest of their agency. They don't have to overly show the rationale. But the rule of two, so you understand it, is at the very end, when they're making an award, there should be two companies they can pick from that are absolutely qualified to do the work and the pricing is good, right? That's what rule of two means. That means you need to have more people having responded to the RFP so that some are not so good, some are not qualified, right? But you need more people. The contract officer needs to know that there's going to be more than just two people responding to the RFP. In order to expect that to happen, they need, and the sources saw it during that market research, to see 10 or 20 small businesses, women-owned small businesses responding, because then they will go, well, look, there's people who are interested. They're saying their experience, they have past performance, and they say they're going to respond to the opportunity. I feel comfortable setting it aside to women-owned small business, right? That's the process. And as you learn this, right, every agency, every contracting officer is a little different. But what I'm saying is a very good model. Have 20 people who can respond. You might only get half of them respond to any given one, but you want to track on that. The other thing is respond to RFIs and sources sought as they come out. I already talked about copying the Small Business Pro. That's really important, but respond to the ones that are in your sweet spot. And when you respond, ask for a woman-owned small business. If you're double tagged, right, of SDVO and woman-owned, if you're trying to drive women-owned small business set-asides, don't mention both certifications or tags or whatever, right? Sit there and have this paragraph, and I have a whole blog on it on my website about that has the exact language that I put in that says, basically, please consider setting this aside to woman-owned small business. We can compete. We know there's a lot of other interested vendors. When you do it that way, they think about the women-owned small business set-aside. You don't make them have to decide between a couple of them, and then the next thing you go, it's off somewhere else. The other one is, if you need to, start pushing for the opportunities you see. If they're not on the NAICS that you want, you can influence that. You can push women-owned small business NAICS. I'm not going to go too far into that. But the other one, last tip I just want to say is find expiring contracts in the agency you want to go after, in the work you want to go after, that were the recipient. If you go to USA Spending, the recipient is a woman-owned small business. So many of these, they were won under other designations than women-owned small business set-aside. Clearly, there were not many women-owned small business set-asides. But if you find something like that and you got it a year out, you're pursuing it or something, you can go to the contracting officers and say, hey, it was already being, the incumbent is a woman-owned small business. Would you set it aside on the recompete to woman-owned small business? That person's still going to compete probably, but now you've tightened up that competition. You can go to govconchamber.com /woman-owned small business or WOSB. to find a whole bunch more training that I have in there. But I want you to remember a couple of things coming out of today's training, right? Nobody in the government is going to give you women-owned small business set-asides. They're not going to give it to you. You got to go take it. There's no conspiracy in the government to hold women-owned small businesses down. They're just not doing it. And so there's things we can do to go make it happen. And if you keep in mind that they're not going to give it to me, I got to go take it. How can I take it? I can respond to Source Aside. I can get 20 other women-owned small businesses to respond. That'll work perfect. The second thing I want you to remember is to engage early and often with contracting officers, with COs, KOs. I teach this in the 7-step process that you want to have relationships so you can hear about opportunities. Those relationships, some of these relationships are with contracting officers that you want to pursue. Go find contracting officers already working with women-owned small businesses. They've already built the trust in women-owned small businesses. Now you just need to drive opportunities with them as you go forward. But you need to establish a relationship early, right? Don't go in there at the very last minute. Start in the agencies you want now. And then the task I want you to take away from today, commit to yourself that it's not just here to learn and hey, that's great, but find 20 women-owned small businesses. Start with the chat. Look in the chat. If people have said, hey, I'm a woman-owned small business, I do IT or construction or something. If you've put that in the chat, or if everybody has put it in the chat, you can scroll back and look and go, oh, hey, let me connect with Jane or with Tammy or somebody and build that relationship. But start building the team of 20 women-owned small businesses that are in your space. We do these trainings every single day. I'm back tomorrow. We're talking another great topic. Make sure you signed up for our newsletter. That's where we put the notification out about the training. You can also, when you look at the trainings, you're able to add it to your calendar. So it's there. We do this every day, noon Eastern, and you should be coming back for the learning, obviously professional development, but for the community that's in the chat. There's 50 or 100 people here at any given point. And you want to build a relationship with these folks. Don't forget to sign up for the networking event that we're doing. You can go to govconchamber.com/networking to do that. And for everybody, remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.